Hello viewers, tonight I am going to do a video that I have wanted to do for quite some time. Now, this is going to be what may be called a video response. Very much like the old-fashioned way video responses used to be done on YouTube, I will be using the mention system on YouTube to mention this particular YouTuber in question. I have wanted to do this for some time. Now, the video that I will be responding to and reviewing is a video that Avenger7 decided to do pertaining to the word woke. This is a word that Avenger truly does not have very much of an understanding of. He does not know the historical origin of it, and he doth not know what it means whatsoever. Which, truth be told, in any other instance, at least for most people, saying a word, not knowing what it means, nor understanding what is the origin of it, and yet simply flagrantly using it, would embarrass most people. However, many individuals such as Avenger7 have been doing this, and they have not felt very embarrassed. They have no understanding about this vernacular. They have no understanding about the slang word known as woke. It has a very long history. The only reason individuals such as Avenger does not understand it is because it is a very specific type of vernacular. It is African American, or rather Black American vernacular. All right? Many individuals of all races, immigrants who have come to this country, have, for the most part, a knowledge of a good deal of Black American vernacular. Just about every race has, in some wise, learned some of it. It is so very popular. We see it in our media. Black Americans have affected so many different cultures and peoples who reside here in this country. Woke, as a term, is Black American vernacular. Now, we are going to discuss this in more detail, and we are going to watch at least some of his video, if not listen to the majority of it. I am not going to allow him to have any sort of claims or grounds for copyright at all. Alright? I do have commentary gameplay to play in the background, and I can listen to this individual's voice. And I can basically do a type of audio podcast in which I can respond to him that way. However, I am showing his channel, and I am going to at least peradventure play some of it. You can know who I'm talking about, and you can look at his video yourself. Now, he is an Asian American, it would seem. I have watched his channel before, and I'm simply going to say before I begin, this is not done to embarrass him. This is not being done to basically degrade this man's reputation. He is a family man. He is a Christian pastor. I have nothing against him. However, I feel the need to correct him for whatever it is worth. Now, the reason I'm saying this is not because I am pretentious, and I'm saying, oh, I am going to correct him about his wrong thought or wrong speech. No. I'm going to correct him in the sense that he is using a word that has a very specific origin. The word woke, the vernacular of stay woke. This has been in the Black American community for so very long. And many of us who are Black Americans descendants of slaves, many of us feel the need to speak. For so very long, many of us, we have allowed all types of people to say what they want about our culture, who we are, whatnot, without any arguments, whether that is using the N-word and calling us, that, or even just taking Black American culture and misrepresenting it, especially considering the fact if we do this to Jewish culture, if we do this to any type of Asian culture, we as Black Americans, we are often corrected. Now, what I'm doing is no less than what he would do if I took something up from his culture and started using it in a way that is basically misrepresenting that culture. That is what he and many Republicans and white supremacists, open white supremacists, have been doing. They know the origin of the term woke. Now, this Asian American man, as far as I'm concerned, he should know. Maybe he doth not know. Maybe he doth not know the origin. Peradventure, he doth know. If he doth know, then, well, he knoweth what he is doing. Those of you who are familiar with my channel know that occasionally I do use early modern English just simply to practice. So sometimes you may hear me using some different suffixes and different words that you may peradventure not be familiar with. But I like to practice my grammar. I like to utilize different aspects in diction to improve the way I speak. But anyhow, as well as just to literally gain a good deal of skill in the usage of words. But anyhow, that has really nothing to do with this video. So it is time for me to get started. It is time for us to listen to this man's video. It is time for me to basically share my opinions about it. So the title is, why is everything getting all woke all of a sudden, and how to fix it?
Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? This is Pastor Peter here again. I wanted to record another vlog of my thoughts on what's going on with the world.
I do have some games.
This time I want to talk about the concept of wokeness. Why is everything getting more and more woke? Not just in America, but around the world, we see this rise in non-traditional thinking, a rise of thoughts about equity, of raising minority status people to the point where they're elevated even above what we would consider traditional equality. And this sort of social rampage against what was traditionally understood.
Now, I have to, frankly, this is incredible simply to hear this from an Asian American. An Asian person who, as far as I know, is living in America. He hath an American accent. Incredible. This man would not even be in this country if it were not for individuals demanding equity. That more equity than what was ever the intention for white supremacists America ever really intended to give. The old system worked very well for white Americans of excluding minority populations from everything, even immigration. This man would not even be able to sit here and talk to us were it not for the Black American Civil Rights Movement. Why? Why? Well, let us put it this way, and we know this for a fact. We know this as a fact. When the Jim Crow laws and the separate but equal laws were in place, and many other different types of legislations, whether they be eugenic legislation, even having to do with miscegenation and many other such things, were in place. Asian Americans were in no good position, nor were they in any type of political position to even resist the discrimination that was upon them. Whether we're talking about, the earlier Chinese immigrants and the Chinese railroad workers and the like, that push against white supremacy and the racist government which favored white Americans above all other groups was exactly what allowed Asian people to be able to immigrate here to the United States in large numbers, as well as not simply being deported, because there was a time when a lot of Chinese immigrants were being turned away and you could not even immigrate here. They used them to build railroads, and then they started turning them away. You could not even immigrate to this country, and there were deportations. So this is incredible. This is quite incredible to hear what he is saying. Oh, these people want equity. They're getting more equity than white Americans are getting. How so? How are black Americans in some type of, because we are going to see that basically he is going to be specifically talking about black Americans, but the dynamic in which he is talking about needeth some degree of rumination, because the position in which he is speaking about basically, the minorities being given rights that are basically greater than those of the majority population is quite incredible. Okay. How are black Americans able to prevent white Americans from getting jobs, able to discriminate against them in policing, able to exercise power over them in basically every branch of life? Okay? The legal system, in which black Americans who are killed by police are, most of those people cannot even receive justice. We have Daniel Penantalio, or Daniel Penny, or whatever his name is, was allowed to choke a black man to death on the train for 15 minutes. He is a white man who choked a black man to death for 15 minutes. As far as I know, he is a white Jew, but he is still white. Okay, he still has he is not a black man. Now, can any of us imagine a world in which a black man would be able to choke a white man on the train for 15 minutes, and you have people talking about pardoning him? Like, what is that woman's name? At least more than one governor has talked about pardoning Daniel Penny, and they really wanted to do it. They really wanted to pardon Daniel Penny. Okay, but minorities have so many rights, especially black Americans. Black Americans have so many rights, right? And black Americans, it must be said, black American descendants of slaves are a very special group, and you can't really take them and sort of place them in the category of, oh, this is just any other minority group. No, this is Native Americans and black Americans are the foundational sacrifices of this country. And he is a religious man, he is a Christian, and he must understand something about religion. Now, this was an old pagan type of thing to do, where if you built a building, you would put literal bodies in the foundation. To be honest, everything that immigrants have, the opportunity that they talk about, that they were sold by the American government, this is the land of opportunity. This is the land of opportunity. It has never been the land of opportunity for the tribal Americans or the black Americans who are descendants of slaves. It never has been. Okay? But he's talking about the rights of after all, the minority groups, as he's saying, somehow they have more rights than white Americans. That is quite incredible. Now, one can only imagine who his friends are. Sad to say. But we are going to continue with this video. I really have to hold myself back from speaking. I really do, because it is hard for me not to give commentary on this.
Good as good, specifically in the area of sexuality and in the area of race. So no longer is it about equality, but it's more about righting wrongs from the past, equity, reparations in a variety of ways. So how did we get here? Now, what is interesting is I want to say that...
Now, one moment here. A lot of these people, whether it's the LGBT movement or any other sort of group that has basically co-opted the politics of black Americans, many of us do not agree with that lifestyle. He is a Christian, and if he engaged with a good deal of black American Christians, he would know. A lot of us black American Christians do not agree with LGBT lifestyles. This is a thing that he would recognize if he actually engaged on a daily basis with foundational black Americans daily. If he had some type of interaction with us who are Christian, and yet acknowledge the history of this country, and even foundational tribal Americans, okay? And even those two populations are mixed up, if you look at the history of it, okay? But if he were to take a look, if he were to engage with a lot of us, with those of us who acknowledge the history of this country but are still Christian. There are many of us, we are Christian. We do not appreciate LGBT sexual lifestyles. We do not. But he, just like many other individuals, have decided to take the propaganda, so to speak, and for whatever reason, they should know better, of course. They have decided to associate our struggles as black Americans, as freedmen, as the descendants of slaves, with LGBT. Because the politics are like that. You know, the Democrats are LGBT, they support LGBT. Black people vote Democrat, therefore black people and Democrats we can link those two together. They're our enemy. Yes, we know how white supremacists think, and we know full well that you have, sad to say, basically taken it, into your own Weltanschauung, your own worldview, so to speak, because that to you is just a very simple way of understanding things. However, life is nuanced, and our religion is not worldly, it is spiritual, to be honest. But I really do feel as though many people, they start to view, and they say, he's saying minorities now, but he is going to reveal that he is talking about black Americans, because when you're talking about a black American term, which is woke, you are talking about black Americans. This was his opportunity to let some things off of his chest, which happen to be white supremacist in nature, which basically have to do with this word woke and his whole perception of black Americans. Because a lot of them, they like to take us and they like to say black Americans Democrat. Well, one of the reasons black Americans are Democrat is because of basically both parties basically neglect the black American community, and the Republican Party, they already show a good deal of disdain for the black American community, even going back to Reagan when he was talking about, during the crack epidemic, and where they would have commercials, campaign commercials, and talk about the welfare queens and other such things. You really expect people who've been degraded that much to go to the polls and vote Republican? Many of us black Americans know, and I will tell you honestly, as a foundational black American myself, a descendant of slaves, many of us already recognize that no party helps us. They help, truth be told. But we are going to, or rather, I am going to discuss more things as we listen. But many of us, we do not trust Republicans and we do not trust Democrats. Many of us consider both parties to be against us. So can I put blame on a black American who votes Democrat, or can I even put blame on a black American who votes Republican? Personally, I think the Republican Party is more beneficial for foundational black American descendants of slaves because they are against mass immigration, or they're supposedly supposed to be. Immigration has not helped black Americans. We have, for the most part, during the civil rights movement, that is the whole foundation of different peoples besides white people, white Europeans, coming to this country. If it were not for black civil rights, if you were not white, do you really think you would be here? If it were not for black civil rights, and there were Jim Crow laws, separate but equal laws, do you really think that they would treat you Asian Americans as though you are human? Of course not. You have been allowed, these rights, and because people struggled and suffered for them, and those same people you call woke were doing it. I'm not talking about the woke that the LGBT talk about, because they took a term that was in the Afro-American, that were in the, not African, black American civil rights movement. Black Americans are the only people who are dignified and enough to say, yes, we are black and we are proud. Everyone else tries to run from it. Yes, we know this dark Chinese. We know that in Kyushu in Japan, we know there's darker Japanese. And we know that skin whitening is going on in just about all of those beauty products. And everybody is trying to run from black. But hey, none of you people are white people. It doth not matter how much you want to be, or if you want to be around your white friends and listen to Thomas Sowell and all of those other people who basically, have decided to play the part of coons and decided to not have any self-respect for themselves. Some of us have self-respect, and we will say, we are black and we are not ashamed of it. We are black and we're beautiful. We were the only people who did it. You won't hear that from the African. You won't hear that from Caribbean people. You won't hear that from Jamaican people. In every other country, people are skin whitening. It doth not matter if they are Asian, African, Indian, what have you. Why are all of the people of darker pigmentation, like yourself, Mr. Asna Avenger 7, people of your own race, if they even have that complexion, they want to be lighter? When we talk about white supremacy, we're talking about the conception, the philosophy that white is better, more civilized, more beautiful, and more excellent. But it was due to black woke people, stay woke, who were, basically protesting and suffering and being beaten in the streets. Those same woke people. That is why you are able to have your success and your opportunity in this country. I do not like to tell you what is already and what already should be obvious, but you hear a lot of your Republican politicians who are saying that we need to sort of curtail the teaching of black American history. All right? And they try to set the Asian communities against the black communities, and they decide, well, we're going to curtail black American history, but teach more Japanese American history. They should teach both. They should teach both. Okay? But you have certain history books, black American history books, and look, some of those black American history books they want to take out of the libraries, and a lot of things have been done. Some of those things are, in my opinion, I do agree with. If there are LGBT books in the libraries teaching children about sexual promiscuity, I do not like that. But when it comes to our history as black Americans, descendants of slaves, American freedmen, you had better believe, whether we are Christian, you may consider us conservatives, but hopefully we are spiritual. Hopefully we're heavenly, because I do not want to be worldly myself. I come from this, this old Quaker type Christianity. We do not joke. The Quakers were the only Christians who stood against slavery. I'm not talking about all of these other groups that so many people want to basically laud with praise. You see, actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. They really do. And that's what the black woke civil rights movement did. That is a woke movement. A lot of you people who are Asian, you really do need to learn what these words mean before you take them and put them in your mouths and decide just to simply go off. And a lot of you, sad to say, you do it in a spirit which it is so obvious that the stain is clearly there. And it is so very obvious that many of you really at this point think that you are white. You want to be white. And it burns you up that you cannot be. And you've heard your white friends talk about how blacks are getting welfare, blacks are getting affirmative action, blacks are lazy, and all of this talk. And it really has swelled a lot of you people's heads up. And you think, oh, well, we Asian people or Chinese or Korean or whatnot are better than those lazy black people. But what you individuals do not realize is if it were not for black Americans fighting for their civil rights, those woke black Americans, if they did not fight for their civil rights, you would not be able to have the rights you have in this country. You simply would not. But a lot of you, sad to say, you do not know very much about black American history. Maybe you know the history about your country that you or your parents or your grandparents immigrated from, but you do not know very much about this country's history. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is quite sad. But, what can one expect? You people are immigrants. How can we get you to care that much about this country? It was the land of opportunity for a lot of you people. And you wanted the opportunity, but you did not want the history, and none of you would ever want to trade places with black Americans and say, I wish if I was black. No, you would not. Because you have your own culture, and that is a good thing. But a lot of you are speaking out of ignorance and pride, as well as this desire that a lot of you have to benefit from white supremacy. And a lot of you will not even acknowledge it. But let me share the truth that we as black Americans know, that some of us know. White is supreme. And even in your own countries of origin, whether it be India, Japan, China, the paler your skin is, the better and the more beautiful it is, according to most people. It is the beauty standard of the world. Okay? And those who are considered to be superior in society are rated by skin. You look at the Indian caste system and look at the Varna caste system. What is the Varna caste system? Varna means colors. Many of you will not go into your Bibles and see where the Jews are compared to Ethiopians. Why do you think that? No, I'm not talking about some Ashkenazi Jews from Khazaria, from the Ukraine, and from Russia. No, let's talk about some Sephardic people, what our Bible talks about, who are also discriminated against. But right now we're talking about America. We're talking about black Americans. We're talking about woke. Okay? So basically I'm going to be engaging in some very outspoken commentary here, to be honest.
My philosophy professor from college and seminary predicted this. And I guess if you're a philosopher and you see the trends of what's going on in the world, I guess you sort of predicted this, because He actually predicted this back in the early 2000s. And there was really no word for woke, or that word wasn't around back then. But there was this word called postmodernism.
Wow. I mean, this is just so stupid. There was no word for woke. The word wasn't around back then. Wow. It is sad. No wonder he was a philosopher and not an historian. No, and the sad thing is, it is so sad that so many people, they listen to these white supremacists, they listen to these people who do not know about Black American culture and do not want to know about Black American culture, nor do they have any intention to. This is a word that goeth back even to the 1940s. There was a precursor in 1923. I mean, you can see it for yourself. Okay? The Negro United Mine Workers launched a strike in West Virginia against discriminatory pay. A Black American union leader speaks about learning that they were being paid less than their white counterparts. We were asleep, but we will stay woke from now on. How incredible it is to be this stupid. It really is. How hard would it be just to research a word and to say, no, that's wrong? This is why we all need to learn. We all should endeavor to learn and not just simply speak about things that we do not know about. A whole race and a whole culture of people that we have no real understanding of. Okay, and of course, black is a social status. Black is a social status and white is a social status. And the truth is, a lot of the Asian community, a lot of Asian people, and of course, you know, from all types of different countries want to be part of the white social status. And they try to degrade black people at every turn. And many of us have seen it. And they look for things to divide, to basically, to sort of contrast themselves from black Americans. Okay, that's just what I've seen. 1938, blues musician Huddie Ledbetter, also known as Leadbelly, uses the phrase "stay woke" in his song "Scottsboro Boys." Okay, even going to 1923, Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican philosopher and social activist, Marcus Garvey, "Wake up Ethiopia, wake up Africa," which isn't woke, but still, we can see where the word is coming from. We can see in what sense it is being used. We have William Melvin Kelly's essay, "If You're Woke, You Dig It," appears in the New York Times. Okay? This is a word with a history. Whoever, you know, his philosophy, seminary, or whatnot, whoever this individual was, this was an unknowledgeable individual, and he did not know anything about the subject. And nor does Asna Avenger. So we have Arthur Barry Beckham uses the word woke in his 1972 play Garvey Lives. Look, we have this word is always in the context of black American culture, foundational black American culture, and even from a Jamaican man. So, yes, this has to do with black people. Everything having to do with woke has to do with black people. And this is an Asian man who has taken all of the little white supremacist ideas about black people to heart. And he wants to. He wants to. Because he doth not wish to be considered, you know, he doth not wish to associate himself with the black social status. He wants to associate himself with the white social status. And so many immigrants that have come to this country, they have benefited because of black civil rights, but they want the status of white people. That's what they want. And so they degrade black American history because this is what they would like to do. Okay.
He described it as a viewpoint of modernity, or a viewpoint that was going against modernity, a response to modernity, which was still very much attached to a traditional Western understanding of the world, basically a Judeo-Christian worldview that was very, very much industrialized, capitalized, and individualized, but still a sort of Judeo-Christian way of thinking where there still is truth.
And it is quite ridiculous, because what he is trying to do, people, he is trying to associate all of these weird liberal movements with woke. Listen, the history of the word and the origin of the term is different from what you think it is. Basically, the sexual stuff. And that's what a lot of these white supremacists, and he is a suspected white supremacist, like to do. They like to take the word woke and attach all of these negative things to it. Look, it has nothing to do with a bunch of liberal college professors. This word predates them, so he needs to get his facts straight. But that is all right, because I will do it for him. I will present the facts myself. And that's what I'm doing. But it is sad to hear this level of ignorance about a term that he could, with a simple Google search, he could understand the history of the word and understand how that word itself has been taken by white supremacists and basically used against the black community. And it was also taken by individuals who were involved in sexual movements. Okay, but the sexual movements do not have anything to do with the creation of the term woke. So that is the truth, undeniably the truth.
There still is God, maybe a nebulous understanding of God, maybe not specifically the Christian God, but a nebulous, abstract understanding of God. And there are morals that everyone believes in and should believe in, and there are individual human rights for all, everyone, regardless of what culture that you're in. And so he said that the departure of that, which was happening at that time, 20 years ago, would mean that you would see more and more of these interesting things that are right now on the fringes. And so he described how, as a result of this, because we're leaving traditional Christian...
Okay, what is the woke he is talking about? What is this sort of ideal Western society he's talking about? What is this type of ideal Judeo-Christianity he is talking about? The same Judeo-Christianity that allowed slavery? One of the only Christian groups, one of the only Christian denominations. Hey, look at the Quakers. None of you folks talk about them. You couldn't care less. Okay? The Quakers, I can give them credit. I can't give the Southern Baptists credit, and even, a lot of those other Christians who were not talking about slavery and were not talking about civil rights. So wokeness, so to speak, black American wokeness has always been transforming this country. A lot of the freedoms that we have today have to do with black American social and political awareness. They change so much for every minority in this country. If you were not white, it used to be you were subhuman. Who changed that? Black Americans who put their lives on the line in marches and protests. And yes, they were Christian and they had morals, and a lot of them, as we have seen in this chart about the history of the word woke, yes, they were woke. This is how little you know about these words and this history. This is how little thou knowest about this history. This is how little thou understandest about this history. It is sad that thou art so ignorant of it. Thou art an American. Dost thou have any sort of conception about the history of black Americans? It seemeth as though you do not. And I do like to practice my early modern English. So for those of you who think that is strange, that is fine. I just like to practice it because I read a lot of different books, especially the King James Bible.
Understanding of what sociology and sexuality and humanity is about, you're going to see a rise of what he considered neo-paganism, or the old ways, before what we consider traditional ways. So the rise of things that we would consider abnormal, sexualities.
Listen, sir, I completely understand thee. However, in regard to this, you attaching the word woke to this video and talking about all of these related things, woke is this type of word that you can attach all evil things to. And that is exactly how I can understand that you have basically turned this into some type of dogmatic thing. This is some type of dogmatic thing to you. And the sad thing is that you were completely wrong because you do not know the history of the word, and now you're taking in all of the sexual stuff. You are attaching it to the word woke. You're taking paganism. You are attaching it to the word woke, even though a lot of woke people were Christians, were Black American civil rights movement Christians marching with Martin Luther King and other individuals. But this is a way you can besmirch, you can mar the Black American community. And it is clear. And when you start saying other things that you're going to say in this video, it is going to become so very clear to many of you watching it. And for some of you, you may not appreciate this video. You may think this is stupid content. That is fine. But with all due honesty, I make whatever type of podcast I like, and I talk about what I like. Okay? Whether that upsets you or makes you not want to watch this channel or not, you know, these are the things that I sort of see on a daily basis. And at this point, I like to talk about them now. When I see people like this individual talking about things he clearly doth not know very much about, I feel the need to actually say something. Okay. But I'm never going to finish this video if I keep commentating.
Abnormal behaviors would become the focus. How they would be the ones that would be making a lot of money, because that would be seen as pushing the boundaries against what was traditionally understood as normal. The rise of minority groups.
Is this not the same crowd that says go woke and go broke?
Seen as the ones that
I thought it was not supposed to make
a lot
money.
of injustices against them, and where there would be a mob mentality led by a minority a group. And this minority may not even be a racial group. It could be just be a minority group, whatever that group might be. That
Listen. We knoweth what minority group thou art speaking of. We knoweth that thou art speaking of Black Americans. We know full well that that is what thou art speaking about. We know of it. We know it. Okay. I may have messed up on those suffixes. This is experimental practice. We know of. That's like we knows. No. Okay, I messed up. I did mess up on that one. Okay. I do try to get these right when I can. But anyhow, we know what minority group you were talking about. You were talking about Black Americans. You are going to prove that you were talking about Black Americans very soon. If we did not already know that you were talking about Black Americans when you have a whole video about woke and wokeness and stay woke. We know who you were talking about. It is Black American vernacular English. We know full well that you were talking about Black Americans. So you do not need to be coy. We know that there are many whites, that white supremacy is in every community. We know it. White is supreme. And that black is at the bottom. And for individuals like yourself, that benefits you in society. You have to come here as immigrant groups and you have to tear down black people. You have to talk about us. We're so bad. We're so lowly. You do not even need to pretend, because we already know it. Oh, certain minority groups, it doesn't even have to be a racial group. No, you're talking about woke. That is our word. Figuratively, so to speak. that is a word that came from the Black American community, and you were telling us that, it could be some other sort of minority group. No, you've taken the sexual stuff from the so-called new liberal movement, and you've decided to conflate that with Black American, people and Black American terms like woke. A lot of you should have did your research, because you've put yourself in a position where it is undeniable that a lot of you people are anti-Black. We already know that it is true. And not just him, many other conservative people. But many of us Black people have been saying the same thing. Sure, we could vote Republican, but a lot of you people are anti-Black too. A lot of you people are white supremacists too. You're saying, oh, we're all Christians, we should all vote Republican, we should all support Republicans. A lot of us have our dignity, and we are not going to do it. We are not going to join those movements when they talk so badly about us as Black Americans. We will not. Nor do we care if the Democrats lose any type of position, because some of us, we do not trust either party. But we recognize, talk like this about woke, how so many Republicans take the word woke and talk down about Black history and always say Black people are nothing more than victims. This is a country that has been built upon making people victims. This is a country that has been built upon white supremacy. There are many victims of white supremacy. And there are many people who want to join the white supremacist system and really benefit from it. Okay? And they do not want to associate themselves with Black American struggles or politics in any sort of way, or even sort of support Black Americans or their interests in any fashion. But at the same time will join white Americans in basically talking about how bad Black people are. We know this, and this is why many of us have abandoned any notion of there being some type of Black and brown or Black Asian coalition. We already know a lot of you people came here. This was the land of opportunity for you, and it was built upon Native tribal Americans and Black Americans. Your opportunities are built upon tribal Americans and Black Americans, not to mention the fact that this whole country has been built upon Black and tribal Americans. If you read the history books, it is, these white explorers were talking about red and copper colored tribes. Okay? We know who has been at the bottom this whole time, because some of us know a good deal about American history, and it is about world history. There's always been people who have been basically the scapegoat. Okay? And that is what this is. He wants to take the term woke and attribute all this nasty stuff to it. But it is so clear that woke is a term that he wants to attribute all the liberal evils to. That is what he is doing. That is exactly what he is doing. But he is a Christian. He is such a Christian. He is such a spiritual man, even though he soundeth quite worldly.
Felt that there was injustice against them and would sort of lead the charge, and everyone would back him up. And although the philosophy professor didn't name any specific groups or names, he basically gave the concepts. And now, living in the 2020s era, we see it all around us. And I was just so surprised that he and others like him called it. But then he explained the logic behind it. And basically, the logic behind it was this. Once you take God away, and once you take the Judeo-Christian understanding of God or religion, okay, whether it be whatever religion it is, but specifically the Judeo-Christian understanding of it, because primarily, I guess, this all started in Europe and also in America, the West, basically, this woke stuff. Once you take that away, logically, you only have two groups left to fill in that authoritative void. Okay, and what are those two groups? First one would be the government or the state. And then the second one, if it's not the government or the state, then it's going to be you as an individual or the group that you belong to. Okay? And the reason why is because if God is no longer in control...
This is incredible. It is incredible even to hear such nonsense. It really is. He's talking about particular groups that have basically that basically have hegemony. White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, Christian America, or even Catholic. It doth not matter. Basically, white Christians. Now, if that is the ideal, white Christian America, and wokeness is sort of this arch enemy that has basically been going on since the early 1900s, of black people standing up for themselves and basically other minority groups basically trying to have more rights. I do not agree with LGBT either. However, the term woke started with black Americans. It is so very clear this man basically, his lack of, I do not know, I think it is a lack of knowledge. Sad to say, I think it is a lack of knowledge on his part. He is talking about a particular group. Well, what group had power? So-called white Christians. But he is talking about a particular group gaining hegemony and power, like white Christians. I mean, you certainly would be treated differently if you were a black Christian. And certainly if you were an Asian American walking around, you would be treated differently. During the Jim Crow era, during the separate but equal era, during the times where the Ku Klux Klan had a good deal of hegemony in many southern states, when you had Irish people engaging in racial pogroms in black communities. But after all, he's an Asian American. He would be safe in that environment, wouldn't he not? No, it was because of woke people fighting for their rights. But it's this idea of wokeness. If things change, they must be evil, right? Okay, I understand it.
And if the Bible or whatever religious book that you use is no longer the narrative that helps you understand reality, then there is no God, there is no grand narrative, then you have to make your own narrative.
Narrative. This man is supposed to be so Christian. You should believe in it. If you're such a pastor, it's a history to you, not just some narrative. This whole video of his is so worldly. It is so worldly. Oh my goodness. But let me continue.
And if you can't make your own narrative, then you're going to follow the narrative of the group that you belong to. Or you're going to follow the narrative of the government that directs and guides you. So it's no wonder, and it's not a surprise that, for example, when it came to the COVID lockdowns, isn't it interesting that it was the religious groups, especially the more conservative religious groups, and it doesn't matter what religion it was. It could be Judaism, it could be Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, that the more the people that adhered to their religion the most was the ones that were against the lockdowns and against the vaccine mandates. But the ones who didn't care about religion, of course there's exceptions, okay? But by and far, the ones who didn't care about religion, but who really trusted the state, who really trusted the government as that institution which would make things right, would change things, that those people just pretty much fell in line with the government, okay? And so you see this playing out in real life. Without God and without religion, pretty much is the government or whatever group that you belong to or you prefer to be in charge. Back then, in the 2000s...
and in regard to this, I would say, yes, he is right. There were some pastors, who were arrested for basically opening their churches. Not many of them were brave enough to do that. However, once again, he mentions the conservatives. However, just going to a church does not make you spiritual. Just going to a building does not make you spiritual. And just because you didn't want to assemble does not mean that you did not have faith. Furthermore, you see, he wants to boost up conservatism. He wants to boost up republicanism, so to speak, because to him, the Republican Party is good, the Democratic Party is bad, woke is bad. He doth not even know what the history of the term woke is, but he is going to try to reflect all of the evil of society into the term woke, a black American phrase that has been used since the 1920s, basically. But he's going to take all of his animus and put it on that term woke. When you're putting all of your animus into that term woke, basically, us black Americans who know what the term means know that you are talking about us. We know that you are. He is going to reveal it very soon, and he's going to specifically talk about black Americans. He already talked about reparations. No other group is asking for reparations. Japanese Americans received their reparations. Jewish Americans have been receiving reparations and still receive reparations to this very day because of historical wrongs that have been done to them. Native American tribes, the government offers Native American, tribal Americans reparations. There's only one group he's talking about when he's talking about woke and reparations, and that's black Americans. I have a feeling he does not even, if he does engage with many black people, I imagine they're the type of ones who do not have very much self-respect or even know about themselves. But I imagine he knows about his culture and his history. Okay? Whichever part of Asia that his family originates from, I imagine they know about their culture and history and have pride in it. But if black Americans want to be woke, there's a problem with that. All of the evils are supposed to be attributed to black Americans, obviously.
My philosophy professor basically said, yeah, it's basically might makes right. Because if God is taken away, then who's the mightiest? Right? What power is there to...
That's funny. A person who benefits from American manifest destiny, from the American ethnic cleansing to destroy whole populations of people in the Americas, wants to talk about might makes right, when Christianity was used as an excuse to kill so-called savage races and peoples. It is a joke. It really is a joke. And this is what makes our religion as Christians look bad. It really does. You take a word the history of which thou knowest nothing about. Furthermore, it is incredible. It is incredible. I do not know what to say. I really do not know what to say. This is some of the dumbest. Oh my goodness.
Sort of force you to do what is right in their eyes. If God is out of the picture, then again, it's the government, or it's your tribal group, or yourself, if you're a very, very powerful and strong-willed individual. Okay? And then he started talking about, philosophers already have talked about this, about how, because there is no more God in their viewpoint, whatever someone says is just words that relate to power. Because in the end, if truth is what we make it to be, and righteousness and reality is what we can construct by ourselves.
Listen, the word woke hath nothing to do with moral relativism. This really has nothing to do with the word woke. Why has everything gotten so woke all of a sudden? Because you are taking a term that has a real meaning in black American culture, and you have decided to say, woke has everything to do with sexual promiscuity and LGBT and moral relativism. The people who think that morality is subjective, listen, this is a whole different thing you were talking about. This is not really explaining to us the history of the word woke, or even how, it was traditionally applied for many, 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 many years, and in some cases still is applied in the black community. No, we are not talking about the liberal college professors when we use the word woke. When we use the word woke as black Americans, we're talking about the struggles that black Americans have in a society that has favored white people. But he does not know about anything regarding this. He does not know about the history of the term. And of course, if you were to ask him, he would say, oh, America is not a racist country, or, there is no such thing as white supremacy, or there is no systemic discrimination, even though we see black Americans being killed in the streets by people like Daniel Penny. Oh, that's not racist. Who knows what one would hear from a person such as this? Let it happen to an Asian man, and hear the outcry of some of these individuals, who are basically, they have taken, these are their ideas. This is what they believe. Can I say that they got these ideas from white friends who, are basically, of the opinion that, black Americans are just the lowest of the low? No, this is what he believes, it would seem.
Then whatever we say is true is just a desire for power. Okay, to have people believe and think the way we believe in order to make the world in our image. Okay, we basically become gods, or the government becomes God. Okay, and so as a result, you'll see less and less Judeo-Christian morals in the West. Judeo-Christian morals will be attacked. Okay,
and I have to say, it is interesting because I wonder, what is his ideal? There was a whole stretch of years when we may very well have said this country was a Judeo-Christian country. It was also an anti-black country, a racist country, an anti-Jewish country, an anti-Irish country, an anti-Italian country. And the only people who were considered white were Anglo-Saxon Protestant people. And if you were not that, you were basically considered to be subhuman. You were considered to be less. Okay? So where is this Judeo? It seems to me as though these Judeo-Christians who had so much influence and power had a long time of rule. Now myself, I am simply a Christian. Now, you may say I am of the Society of Friends, a Quaker, or a mystic, or a quietist, or anything such as that, but I am a Christian. I do not need to take this term Judeo-Christian. No, I'm not a Jew. I'm a Christian. But a lot of these individuals who are Christian, they like to apply the term Judeo-Christian because they believe in Zionism. They believe that basically, Ashkenazi Jewish people had every right to disenfranchise and take land from Palestinian people. Well, who cares? After all, most of them are Muslim, right? Is what a lot of these Christians say, let the two people destroy each other in the land and the prophecies will come true. But they're still right and wrong, and the Lord is with the humble and the meek. And if wealthy Ashkenazi Jews and all of those people who moved in and took land and property from Palestinians did that, that was wrong. Okay? The British government is not God. Herzl and the Zionists do not stand for God. This was not some type of godly event, but a lot of you will always say we're Judeo-Christians. You cannot simply call yourselves Christians. You cannot distinguish yourselves and separate yourselves from heathens who do not even believe in Jesus Christ. You cannot even do that. They have beliefs in Jesus Christ. They believe in Jesus Christ. Read the Talmud. Read the Talmud, and maybe you would rethink this idea of you being a Judeo-Christian when you recognize what Jewish people believe in their oral Torah about Jesus Christ. They believe Jesus Christ was the son of a prostitute. They believe Jesus Christ was a wizard. They believe Jesus Christ is burning in hell right now. But a lot of you are more than happy to say Judeo-Christian, but a lot of you will not even pray for Palestinian people or say free Palestine, because it doth not matter if these people think they have a claim to the land. Many of them are Ashkenazi, and there were people already living there, and we're going to stand for what is right. Just like the Quakers stood for what is right, and they said, no, the Bible does not justify slavery. We are against it. But a lot of you people are talking about this ideal time, this ideal society. Oh, society is going away from its roots. Look, when the first so-called Christian decided to justify slavery by the Bible, that is when every single sort of iota of dignity and decency that they had was disproven. The real Christians were not for that. The real Christians stood against that, and they knew what was right. But you want to talk about people moving away from Judeo-Christianity? No, there have always been real Christians. There will always be real Christians. But they are not what you're talking about. Because real Christians acknowledge that this country has a whole history of white supremacy. Okay? But, this is the history of this country, whether thou wishest to acknowledge it or not, is the history of this country. And people like myself know it. Okay, we were born here, our ancestors were born here, we are not immigrants. And we take the time to know the history of our country, and he should too.
The morality will be based upon what the government says, or whatever subgroup or minority group deems is right or appropriate. And you see this being played out. Why is the whole BLM or the transgender issue or the minority or children?
Now, here we go. We see what he did. Now, what he decided to do was basically say, oh, BLM, Black Lives Matter. Not all of us support Black Lives Matter, for one thing. We may be black, not all of us support it. However, they do, they were, some of them were, talking about some issues, some injustices. Now, whether I agree with them or not, it doth not matter. But I see what he did. He combines BLM with LGBT. And of course, they associate themselves with that. And there are many civil rights groups in the black community. They do not associate themselves with Black Lives Matter. But they are working basically, in regard to discrimination against black people in policing, in regard to the criminal justice system being against black people, many of us see it. Many of us experience it. And to us, it is a reality. But of course there's that association. Let's combine LGBT, the weird sexual stuff, with the black community, which is obvious.
Minors getting transgender surgery, such a big deal, right? Well, once you leave those traditional understandings of morality, and you can just make morality the way you want it, you can pretty much fashion the world the way you want. And so those people who before were considered themselves oppressed by those people who were in power, for example, the religious people, now they rise up to the top. And in order to make things right, you have to go against those religious figures and authorities, go against God and the church and Christianity or whatever the religion it is, and lift up those people who were formerly oppressed so that they can have their liberties and they can have their way as a way to right what, in their view, was wrong.
What art thou even speaking about? Truly, what art thou even talking about? Honestly, this is a country that has a whole history that he is completely ignoring. But furthermore, he is saying, oh, well, yeah, of course, none of the civil rights movement who were demanding justice and equal rights, they weren't religious, were they? They did not believe in God, right? They did not believe in God. They were just fake Christians, right? Martin Luther King, all the civil rights movement. No, none of them were Christian. Yeah, they were asking the government to basically engage in fairness. They were asking for justice, but they did not have any right to do that, right? This is the idea. Okay, being talked down to by an Asian American person and being told why we as black Christians or just black people who have some type of dignity and view that our people have been disenfranchised and victimized and are still being victimized now, at least, on an individual level. When you walk down the street and someone stops and frisks you and racially profiles you, nothing. It's completely normal. It's completely acceptable. This is not a racist country, right? This is not a racist country. Okay? Of course not. Yeah, and we're woke. We're woke. A word you do not even know. You do not even know the meaning of it. You do not even know the meaning of it. You really do not. But you want to call us woke and say, oh, they want to equalize things. Well, if you do a wrong to someone, if you basically go against a whole community of people in your country, and you have religious leaders who justify slavery, who even to this day justify white supremacy, and had segregated churches for the longest time, and in some places in this country still do, where if you are a black man and you walk into that church, you will be discriminated against, so they will not let you worship. If you have ever heard about sundown towns, you know it still happens today. But we are supposed to forget this history, because after all, none of those civil rights movement, all of those woke people did not believe in God. Those woke people were a bunch of anti-God moral relativists. He is conflating different ideologies, and he is attaching it to woke. Woke is a black term. You are attaching it to black people. That is what you were doing. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, that is what you were doing.
Okay, and here's the problem and here's the weakness, is that how do we know when things are fully reparated, right? We can already see that if there's no God, and if the government or the tribe, the group you belong to, is the judge, then everything becomes contrived. Everything becomes, well, I don't think justice has fully been given yet, and so let's try to get more. Let's try to gain more power, right? We see that right now.
This is quite a joke. Are we talking about real power? Are we talking about the power that destroys nations, that destroys tribes? Are we talking about the sort of governmental power to establish treaties with tribal Americans and then completely break them? Are we talking about the power to engage in a campaign of manifest destiny and take scores of land, move European immigrants into that land, and basically annihilate whole communities of tribal Americans? Are we talking about the type of power that it takes to enslave basically brown people, black people, put them on plantations and keep them in slavery for hundreds of years? Are we talking about the power to take someone from their family and sell them? Are we talking about the power to make a white water fountain and a black water fountain and give lesser facilities to black people, to literally tell Chinese immigrants you cannot come to this country? That is power. Do not tell me that people now, that minorities have that much power, or that somehow, these people do not believe in God and they have more power than the white man, and we need to help the white man because the white man is being disenfranchised, and these mean minorities are gaining such power that they're able to discriminate against us. Wow. Discrimination without very much power at all, right? Racism even without very much power at all. But racism with power is far more capable. When you are able to prevent the literal, when you are able to economically stagnate a whole, racial group of people, when they create communities like Black Wall Street in Tulsa and different black communities in black cities, and you have rednecks come into those, white Americans come to those communities and destroy them with fire. That is power. Do not tell me about power when you have no real understanding about the history of this country. You do not, and you will not mention the real history of this country, because you could do research about the history of this country regarding black Americans, white Americans, Chinese Americans, Asian Americans in general, tribal Americans, and you can see who has the power. White Americans had power. Particular individuals of white American descent had power. So this is a joke. This is funny. This is ridiculous. Okay, it really is.
Also, another weakness is, well, when is full equity, this is related to what I said before, achieved, right? Because if equality isn't good enough, where we have the equal amount of percentages represented in whatever minority group there is, contra to the majority group, be it in the area of occupation, in the area of race, in the area of gender, if it's not based on...
Wow. Oh, really? You know, if you're a black American man with a criminal record, a lot of those people would beg to differ in comparison to white American men who have criminal records. But everything is equal. All of those ideas about inequality that we have and that we think about, that's just wrong. Everything was solved with Martin Luther King, right? When Martin Luther King achieved what he achieved with his civil rights movement, everything was solved, even though he was still fighting, and even until the day he died. And he was killed. So after all, everything is equal now. Everything is equal now. Now, in regard to what government does, everything is always contrived. The only reason government does anything is because of the people. It is when the people decide that they have received justice. Okay? The people control the government. And black people have always spoke for equality and the benefit of their people, just like every other group does. But the interesting thing about black people is that when African immigrants were being denied, black Americans decided that black Africans should be allowed into this country. Okay? When other groups were being denied because they were not white, black American civil rights movement, individuals in the black American civil rights movement decide to stand for them. They decide to stand for them. Okay? That was the basis for our civil rights in this country. And things are still not equal. That is a joke. That is quite the joke. And Daniel Penny is proof that things are not equal. How some black criminals have been treated in comparison to white criminals is still proof. It is complete proof that there's not any type of equality. You can be literally lynched to death on a train by a white man, and people can talk about pardoning him. Oh, he doesn't need any charges. He's a hero. But this is what we hear. This is what we hear from this Asian American man who, in my opinion, he does not have a understanding of American history at all. He shows ignorance on the subject. He may be an intelligent man, but this is a subject he is ignorant about.
The ratio of getting that balanced, the appropriate ratio for whatever country that you're in those fields or whatever you're doing, which is already very hard to do because how do you force the right ratio of men to women in each fields without making it something that's obligatory and trying to give them the voluntarily free will method to be able to do that? And also, what are the categories that you use for equality? So we first of all, we can't even figure out what equality is, but now we're inserting equity into that too. What were the past injustices that were done, and how do we right it, right? And how long will it take until full justice is served?
Well, let's talk about equity. Let's talk about what you're talking about, how, people don't really need this sense of equity or this understanding that there should be equity. All right, Asna Revenger, whatever your name is, let us talk about equity, and let us say, black Americans, let's say in the 1960s and before then, black Americans decided we're not even going to do the civil rights movement. Let us say somehow you as an Asian American got here to this country and basically you recognized you were being treated differently. And let's say the white Americans said the same thing to you. Why should you talk about equity? We do not know how much equity you should have. The reason that there is even a concept of equity is because black Americans here in this country demanded justice. This does not happen often. Let us see if it happens in China, Japan, or any of those Asian countries, especially in India. And let us see what type of idea of equity. No, this is a novel idea. You had a race of this, you had a whole group of people who were descended from slaves who asked for justice and equity and equality. And it even benefited people who are not black. This wasn't like the movement of Gandhi, where he basically was racist against black Africans and Muslims. No, black civil rights movement's leaders actually helped Asians in this country, because that black civil rights movement helped basically break some very racial standards in this country. Now, you have hundreds of years in which black people were not allowed to read or write. It was called the compulsory ignorance laws. But he does not know about any of this. He does not. But, I'm going to talk some about that later on. But, no, I suppose I should just bring it up now. Now, in regard to what we may call affirmative action, you can read articles about how affirmative action has helped white women more than anyone, because I know that is what he is talking about, and a lot of these Asian conservatives like to talk about affirmative action. Affirmative action is so bad for everyone. Affirmative action is terrible. Well, talk to some of the white women. Why are you always talking about us? It was made for black Americans, but it actually helps white women more than anyone. So why are you talk about white women? Will you talk about white women? I do not think that you want to talk about white women. I have a few good ideas why you do not want to talk about white women. You want to talk about black people. That's who you want to talk about. That's what this whole video was about. That's why you want to talk about what is woke and who is woke.
For example, because of the whole slavery racism issue, we see so many black dramas, black comedies, black actors being put up there, black directors and actors.
Oh my goodness. Here's when we start seeing it is not about minorities, it is about black people. This person does not understand that the reason black people have such a presence in Hollywood is because black people were in Hollywood before Asian Americans. And he's going to talk about Asian Americans in Hollywood, Asian people in Hollywood very soon. However, black people in Hollywood were there because they struggled to be there. Black people in comedy were there because they struggled to be there. Okay? Now, even Ashkenazi people, Ashkenazi Jews, got their sort of success in the comedy business and movies and the like. Of course, they had a good deal more money and a good deal less discrimination. However, black Americans made their presence in Hollywood. They gained a great deal of influence in music, Harlem, soul music, blues, all of that type of stuff. In every entertainment industry, black people have excelled. They have, due to struggle. And many black Americans, they still are in Hollywood despite the struggles. And there are less Asian Americans who have influence there because they were not there as long as black people were. They weren't there. They were not there as long as foundational black Americans were in Hollywood. Okay? Freedmen, descendants of slaves, have been in Hollywood, movies, music for a long time. So that is why they have their comedies. That is why you see on television. Why do so many black people have things on TV? Because they were involved in that. A lot of those black Americans had a passion for acting and they were good at it. And a lot of them, they're still making strides. We can say the same about Asian Americans in regard to math and science and other things. Black Americans have excelled in many areas, actually every area, but especially acting and the arts. Okay? But would he say this about Jews? Would he say this about white Americans? No, he would not. But he can say it about black Americans because that's who he wants to tear down. And it is so clear. Getting awards, and above and beyond all the other minorities, okay, for example, the Asians and other minority groups, because of the special history that African Americans had in America. Okay, so I guess I'm talking about America specifically on this point. And that's just jealousy. That's just jealousy. And the reason it is jealousy is because he's saying special history. Well, some of that special history has to do with the fact that black Americans really, they were in Hollywood, they were in movies before Asian Americans. They ingrained themselves in the entertainment industries and really worked hard in them. So, of course, they have gained opportunities for themselves despite the racism in those industries. So he is talking about overrepresentation. The reason that they are represented so well is because they have been in that industry longer than Asian American immigrants. Okay? So let him talk about white Americans. So it's this idea of we Asians are the model minorities. We need to tear down the black minorities to get more. That is the idea. You know, why? Why can't you just leave black, what do black actors have to do with you? What does black Hollywood have to do with you? Nothing at all. Nothing at all. If you want more Asian American actors, you get involved. Start acting or convince more Asian Americans to get involved in the acting trade and the arts. They are not overrepresented because, they're not represented as much because there are not as many Asians in Hollywood. There are not as many Asians doing that type of work. And they have their history in Hollywood and in movies and in entertainment in this country is shorter than that of black Americans. Black Americans have been at it for a very long time in this country, in the acting trade, and frankly, they predate the activities of the Asians in those same industries. So that is so obvious. But it is incredible to hear this. But not really I expected at this point.
It's pretty obvious that black actors and African Americans are getting a lot of privileges as a result of the whole movement of equity. But when does that stop? Right? When do the reparations stop? It doesn't seem like...
Listen to how condescending that is. Black Americans did not get anything due to their own effort. It's all privilege. Their roles in acting and in movies has nothing to do with the fact that they're flamboyant actors, that they have a special, that many of these black American actors of a freedmen descendancy, descendants of slaves, freed slaves, have good skill in acting and are just unique, whether we're talking about James Earl Jones or, Wesley Snipes or Chris Tucker or just different black actors, Tyler Perry or anyone else. It has nothing to do with talent. It has nothing to do with business savvy. No, it is because of privilege. It's because of privilege. This is the white supremacist idea that the black man in this country cannot achieve anything without the help of the government and welfare. This is a privilege. Yeah, because anything we do is going to be considered a privilege by you because he is a white supremacist. He is an Asian white supremacist. That's exactly who he is. And that's so Christian to literally have such a low opinion about one whole group of people. But, that is exactly what should be expected. He wants to consider himself part of that white social status.
Like it's ever going to stop, right? And who determines what makes it equal or equitable? So I think there's a big weakness in this. Anyways, I just wanted to explain how we got here and the way out of this mess. Okay, and in my opinion, it is a mess because pretty much what we've done by focusing on wokeness and social equity and basically just another expression of social Marxism that's not based on money, but is based on different social categories such as class and gender and race and occupation. The way to get out of this is to go back to Judeo-Christian norms, to go back to Christian spirituality, to go back to pray and desire a revival. Because in the end, that would be the logical solution to all of this. If God is put back into authority.
Right. God is the white man. Basically, God is the white man. Too many minorities, too many black people, not minorities, because he admits that he is in the minority. But the problem he has is that black people are the poorest. Black people get everything by privileges, according to him. They get nothing by talent. They get nothing by their own skill. They are the lowest of the low, and they should be put down to a low part in society. They should be put in their place. These black people are complaining too much. They're making us minorities look bad. These black people get too much. These black people have so much talent in Hollywood. We have to put them in their place, and we have to tell them, no, you get this by privilege. And we need more Asian actors, even though Asian people, for the most part, have different personalities than black people. They have a different demeanor than black people. There's a reason why a lot of black actors are favored. Black people come into the acting trade and into movies. They bring a different type of atmosphere to the movie. And there's a reason they are favored in Hollywood. There's a reason why black people have worked hard in Hollywood and gotten a good deal of accolades in Hollywood. This is not merely due to privilege. He is talking about some old Judeo-Christian society, yeah, because black people, after all, are not Christian, and black people who advocate for their civil rights and dignity are not Christian. No, our God has to be the white man. Our God has to basically be a God who decides that the white man should lead us all as minorities, and that basically the black people, black Americans in particular, a specific type of black people, black descendants of slaves, they just complain a little too much. They just complain a little too much, and they get things for free. They're welfare queens. All of this racist talk from anti-black talk from people like Ronald Reagan. Many of us already know. So he doth not even know how to really explain himself, and he did not even in the comment sections. If you want to look at that comment section, I will have the video link in the description. It's quite something. Okay? It was quite something.
And if the Bible is put back as a respectable, authoritative book from which we can draw principles to live our lives, then we can see the wokeness become less.
He says we. There will always be people who reject the Bible. And true Christians will always be few. You cannot basically have a society that is just basically going to accept the Bible. There will always be people in the society, in the nation, who are not going to be Christian or even true Christians. When we're talking about a nation, we're talking about a worldly thing. What are you as a Christian doing to be a spiritual man and to live your life personally? Society is always going to change, and black people are always going to stand up for their rights, whether you as an Asian person likes that or not. And you say the black minority is a bad influence, is a bad group. This group, does not work based on their own talent, but all they do is get handouts from the government. Say the same thing about tribal Americans. Say the same thing about them. Because he could make the same argument about tribal Americans who were massacred and had their land taken from them. Same as in regard to black people. There were whole black cities, like Black Wall Street, burnt down to the ground. But after all, we need white Judeo-Christian society. He should add white in front of that whole designation that he has decided to mention. Because in a sense, that is almost, it almost seems as though that is what he really wants. There is something wrong with the black minority group. That is the idea. And he, as I said, he did not have very much to say in that comment for his video at all. He could not explain himself. He could not explain the definition or origin of the word woke. He did not know. He embarrassed himself. He really did. But I'm going to continue to listen to this video.
Less and less, and have less authority in our social spheres, in the social life, and it will go back into more of a minority type of thing, where the Judeo-Christian view would then rise back up to the top. So we do need to put God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and we do need to pray that basically God and Christianity would again be.
But let's be honest, that whole video he did had nothing to do with God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. It had to do with his own biases. It's basically his own prejudice against black people. And the fact that black people, you know, and their idea of woke, of sort of struggle for themselves as black people and their right to be treated with some degree of justice and equality, is itself just ludicrous. So he does not believe that black people have any sort of logic or any sort of reason to demand equity and justice. So in other words, he believes that wokeness, stay woke, is itself, you know, it's a term that can just be associated with everything having to do with sexual immorality and all of this stuff, which it does not. It was a term that meant something entirely different. He is an ignorant man. He really is.
Something that's respected, and a worldview, the Bible, the biblical worldview, would be something that would be respected again, or else we're going to continue down this line of woke progressivism where it's all about equity, and in the end, it doesn't look very equal for those people who are in the majority. Okay, they will then become the new minority, and we're going to have a lot of...
Is this a joke? Oh my God, this is a joke. This is funny. Oh, they're gonna become a new minority. They're gonna become a new minority. No, listen, that could never be the case. They're not going to be the minority because they killed any other group that could become the majority. This whole country was full of a whole different types of peoples, whole races of peoples, tribal Americans, copper and red tribes that were slaughtered. There was a whole, you know, anyone who was black was able to be enslaved and used for free labor. Just about every country has been influenced in some way by white nations that have the predominant, that basically are dominant in all of the world, where we're talking about Britain, the United States, Australia. This is a joke. It is a joke even to hear this. This is ridiculous to even hear something like this. They will never be the minority. They never will. The leaders we have, the presidents, are white. There's only been one president who was half white, half African. And Barack Obama is related to King George. He is related to English aristocracy. No, not English aristocracy, royalty. He is related to British royalty. So is Donald Trump. Okay. This is a joke. White people are not going to become the minority. This is this weird idea that he has of white genocide. This is an Asian man. He is not white. Maybe he thinketh that he is white, but he is not white. Maybe he should look in the mirror and recognize that he is not a white man. No, Asian people, you know, they will always be the minority here. Black people will always be the minority in this country. White people will always be the majority here. That is without any doubt. And some people say, oh, Latinos are coming here, illegal immigrants are coming here, this country will no longer... A lot of Latino people consider themselves to be Spanish. When they have to take the census, a lot of Latino people will write white. A lot of Latino people consider themselves to be Blanco or Blanca. They do not consider themselves to be brown. They do not consider themselves to be basically black or anything of the sort. They consider themselves to be white too. White is a social status that just about every group except black people want. Some black people want the social status of white, but they never will be able to achieve the social status of white. Irish people were not considered white. Italians were not considered white. But eventually they too started to engage in their little racial programs against black citizenry, against black communities, and they became white too. Irish people became white. Italian people became white. They were not white when they had first come to this country. They were not considered white. But they too started to receive the benefits of white people. And that has not ended. There are a lot of Asian people. They want to say things about black Americans and distinguish themselves and say, oh, the black people are basically, they're against the white people, and the white people are going to lose their status as the majority group. And that is that white Anglo-Saxon Judeo-Christian world he wanteth to live in. It hath nothing to do with religion, Jesus, God, or anything. Jesus said, if they hate you, know that they hated me first. Okay? And myself, anyone who is black knows what it is like to receive, or at least if you have experienced some real anti-black racism that's different than any other type. People do not even have an excuse for it. It's just you're black and you're the lowest of the low, and you should know it. In regard to Hollywood and just about every other industry, black people worked hard, even despite the discrimination. In Hollywood, no, they earned their roles in Hollywood. In black movies and black TV, that wasn't something that was granted to them. That was something they worked for. They had great talent in acting. Even today, we see a lot of black American actors who, they excel in those fields of acting and arts because they are good at them. The government didn't hand them Hollywood. And of course, they do not have Hollywood. But yes, among minority groups, black people have a good deal of representation of Hollywood because of their hard work. You can say, you can say the same things about other different minority groups in the fields in which those people excel at. But this man, it was clear what he was doing. That is called condescension. He's condescending towards black people. He's saying, oh, these black people are overrepresented in Hollywood and movies. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure that he believes it.
Different lifestyles that don't seem to be to make sense to live by this type of lifestyle, but because of the fact that there's no one to say anything against it, because there's no more God, there's no more Bible, all you have to do is find a group that's loud enough, that has enough money to promote that lifestyle, and you have every right to live that lifestyle, and that lifestyle will be encouraged not only on you but on everyone else, including children.
And he says there's no more God. Well, if there is a God, it doth not matter if you believe in him or not. If there really is a God, he exists whether you believe in him or not. And in regard to people's rights, people have every right to do what they please. They do. Now, what a person does for themselves and their family as a Christian is their own personal business. But this idea, people have the right to do this and people have the right to do that. Well, yeah, there was a time when black Americans did not have the right to marry white women. And if you married a white woman, you would be lynched and they would hang you from a tree. But things have changed. Yeah, they used to call that Judeo-Christian society as well.
Children, and at the end, you will be the one that needs to respect that, or else you'll be called a bad person and you'll be canceled and banned and all of that. The things that we're seeing today. So pray for revival.
Okay. Now that man has been watching a lot of Fox News or some conservative memes, some alternative right memes, and he has really, he has really sort of gotten it to his head. It's really laughable that a man of that degree of intelligence has taken all of those stupid little white supremacist talking points, and he's basically regurgitating them. It is embarrassing. A man that old basically sounding like some little white alternative right youngster.
Pray for God to be put back into the different spheres of our society. Pray for the Bible to be put back.
Listen, God does not have to be respected in society. God still exists. God wants the few. God considers, and this is just Christian understanding in the Gospels, in the early church. In the early church, the church was being persecuted. And if you wanted to be a Christian, you had to be willing to die for your beliefs. Christianity was not popular then, but the church was still strong because the people had a strong ideological, you know, they were strong ideologically. Quality versus quantity. I want quality. I don't want quantity. I don't want a bunch of white supremacist Christians. Oh, it's a whole nation full of white supremacist Christians. Well, they're still white supremacists and they're not really Christian. Because a Christian is not some white supremacist. Okay? And Christians acknowledge when wrong is occurring. Just like the Quakers did with slavery. Just about every other Christian group wanted to ignore that issue. But the Quakers knew that that was wrong. Why were the Quakers the only ones who, for whatever reason, seemed to know that slavery was wrong? All of a sudden, now the Christians agree that slavery is wrong, when a lot of those people like the Baptists and the Methodists and a lot of those groups used to think that it was right. It is a joke. Absolutely ridiculous. We are talking about what is spiritual, not what is worldly, when we're talking about what is Christian. But, you know, and I stated the same thing in the comment section. You know, none of what he said had to do with Jesus Christ. It's a bunch of politics. It's a bunch of political stuff. This whole conservative Christian political, you know, idea.
Into the different spheres of our society as well, and that will be a good blockage to the woke craziness that we see today. Those are some of my thoughts. God bless, and hope you have a good day. Hey everyone, how are you guys?
Quite something. This was a big joke. This was a big joke. I'll put it that way. Now, I brought up some things to talk about. After all, you know, as we can see, you know, there's already people talking about it. Time magazine, about how affirmative action has helped white women more than anyone. A lot of Asians complain about affirmative action because they say they get the best test scores and they're not being, you know, they're not getting as many college positions as they would want. They want more, and they're not getting enough. And they don't like affirmative action because they believe affirmative action is sort of getting in their way. Not all Asians say this, because there's some Filipinos who disagree and actually apparently benefit from affirmative action. Now let's talk about crime. Let's talk about some of the things that a lot of these Asian people have been saying. They've been saying, oh, there's so many videos of black people attacking Asians. Well, not too long ago, Rick Shao, he's an Asian American store owner. He shot a 14-year-old in the back in South Carolina. He said it was shoplifting. So he and his son, they chased Cyrus Carmack Belton down, and they shot him in the back. Okay, they shot him in the back. You know, why were they so angry about him? Hey, you be the judge. You be the judge. Could it have something to do with the color of his skin? Because he was a black man? Well, this is not some type of you know, because we've seen the videos of Asian people say, oh, we have videos of black people attacking Asians. And they showed us the videos because they wanted to show us a bunch of videos of black people attacking Asians. They weren't showing videos of white people discriminating against Asians, but they want to specifically sort of bolster this bias. But let's talk about Asians attacking blacks. The killing of Latasha Harlins was 30 years ago. Not enough has changed. So what was this? 30 years ago, the 15-year-old black girl from South Central walked into Empire Liquor Market in Delhi, grabbed a bottle that was $1.79 of orange juice and put it in her backpack. A Korean-born merchant, Soon Ja-do, accused her of stealing it. Latasha had $2 in her hands. $2 in her hands. Those Asian people were so racist against these people, you can even have the money. They still think you're stealing. And they want to kill you before you can even walk out, because they hate black people that much. They are the lowest of the low. And as far as they're concerned, you don't deserve respect. You do not deserve any justice. And let's talk about Korean store owner who choked black woman because he thought she was stealing. Okay? Soon Ho Lim, owner of Mrs. Beauty Supply Store in Charlotte, North Carolina, is confronted by the black community after he attacked a black woman who was shoplifting in his store. Who was shopping in her store. In his store. It doesn't say that she was shoplifting. So, The video starts with, let me see, do they have the video here? YouTube account associated with is terminated. It says, check my bag, I'm telling you I don't have it. Next, Holim and his wife can be seen attacking the woman, wrestling her to the ground, and then putting her in a chokehold after apologizing inside his store to a crowd of angry civil rights leaders and protesters. One representative from NOI tells Holim that sorry is not hard to say. He then demands a meaningful apology and warns him that the longer he waits, the longer your store will be financially challenged, because black people are going to boycott that store because they already know that a lot of these Asian people are white supremacists and they think black people are the lowest of the low. They should be treated with disrespect and they deserve to be basically racially profiled. But we're hearing all this stuff about anti-Asian attacks, and some people talk about the raw numbers. A lot of statistics are floating around. If you get the raw numbers, you'll be able to see a better, you'll be able to see more accurate statistics. So basically, there's, Janelle wrong. She did some research and said most anti-Asian attacks are committed by whites. New study. But do you hear any of the conservative people talking about Janelle Wong's statistics and analysis? No, you hear a lot of people just showing videos of people being attacked by Asians. But he'll be all right. He's studying Muay Thai in the UFC gym, right? Well, no, he says that's what the heavy bags of the UFC gym look like. But, this is just, these are just some of the things that can really, sort of change our perspectives. Now, in regard to how the civil rights movement influenced U.S. immigration policy, we already know, because the truth is that back then, there was a quota system. And if you were white, they want a white person to come more than they do an Asian person to come or a Latino person to come, and they wanted white immigrants. After the 1960s, civil rights movement, things started to change, and it is true. Many of these immigrants owe a good deal to foundational black Americans who are the descendants of slaves, of freedmen. So yes, now he may not want to acknowledge any of this, but, I decided I want to talk about this. This video may have been incoherent, but I felt the need. I said I want to make this video for a long time to respond to this man, and I finally have done it. Anyhow, may the Lord bless you, and farewell.